Ready? Okay, welcome everybody to the agenda meeting, for the September 4th meeting. We'll start it off with calling to order, the roll call, moment of silence, pledge allegiance. We have a proclamation, followed by consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions on the consent agenda? If they looked over that? If not, then we will go straight into old business. So first one is ordinance 1989, the amendment to the salary ordinance, second reading. I think we're all familiar with that. Any questions? Nope. Then we're going to go into new business. We're going to start it off with the responsible bidders ordinance. That's something new that we're going to put on there, and just going to bring it up. The new responsible bidding ordinance is designed to protect Munster taxpayers and ensure our public projects are done right the first time, requires contractors to meet higher standards for safety, training, and accountability while preventing payroll fraud and unfair practices. By awarding contracts to responsible qualified companies, we're making sure projects are completed on time at a high level of quality with a transparency for our residents. So do we have any questions on that? Beautiful. Next, engagement, water revenue bond rating.
This is with Standard and Poor's to do the rating for the bond that's being issued later this year. The cost will be paid from the proceeds of the bond itself.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, then we'll go into reports, portfolio reports and adjournment. Next is the redevelopment commission. Same thing, call to order, roll call, public comment, the consent agenda. Are we going to have any old, new, or anything, or is it just going to be the same? Same old, same old. So that'll be easy. Anything with the agenda for September 4th? With that, let's move forward and let's start with our cost savings discussion. Who wants to start?
I'll start with that. Well, I want to just go over the outline here of what we're going to talk about. And this is going to be the tag team between myself, Tricia, and Wendy. We've all worked on this together. We've also got Mary in the audience too. I just want to recognize her because she's helped out quite a bit with putting one together. So just want to start by talking about why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? Obviously, a big issue here is trying to address the impact of SCA 1. We know we're going to have a deficit, so we want to identify the preferred cost savings and revenue options to help us balance the budget. We also want to talk about where we're going to go from here in the next 3 to 5 years, because the decisions we make today are going to obviously affect what we're going to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to get some information on the background of the town's financial condition, review property tax revenue, review what we've done so far this year in trying to save money. And then we'll get into the options and forecasts, cost savings options, which I had sent to you in an email on Friday. You have a printed copy in front of you right now. That's been updated a little bit from what you received on Friday. And then we'll talk about the financial forecast scenarios that we put together, and then we get into some discussion about the forecast for the executive. So I just want to start with this, just to give you a snapshot of where we're planning to be as it is now with the budget for 2026. You can see the projected revenues for the general fund. We're only talking about the general fund here and the parks fund. Projected revenues for the general fund is 10 million, parks 3.7. Then we have the circuit breaker expense, which is estimated to be about $3.3 million, 233,000 of that coming out of parks. I know there's been some discussion about the circuit breaker amount. How did we arrive at that number? What's the correct number? Back in April, we had a much lower number. Now we have a number of about $3.3 million just for next year alone. That is the worst case scenario. So it's difficult to say what number should we put in here. You could pick a number, but we have to start somewhere. So we are starting with the worst case scenario. So you're gonna see that number throughout the projections here. Any questions or discussion about circuit breakers?
Yeah, where's, oh, good, where's planting?
She just picked that on our call.
How does this compare to last year, please?
Hold on, what last year's? So the 2025 circuit breaker total was $589,000. For the general fund is taking about a $384,000 hit for circuit breaker. That's for 2025. So this is a significantly higher number.
Okay, I'm not familiar with these numbers, so I want to repeat what I think I just heard from you. The circuit breaker this year is 3 million.
No, the circuit breaker this year, total across all the funds is, I'm sure I'm reading the right column, $589,000. What you're seeing on the screen is what the projected is for 2026. The worst case scenario for 2026, the general fund will take over a $3 million hit
In circuit breakers.
in circuit breaker expenses. This year, general fund is absorbing only $325,000.
Does that include Senate Bill 1?
That number, yes, it includes Senate Bill 1,
Based on what we were told by the old deal, right?
correct.
So we would have, even if we didn't have the circuit breaker, you're still projecting a deficit.
Correct,
Right, that's what she has in the minutes here, right?
correct.
Yep.
All right, what's changed from last year? Did we have a deficit last year?
The difference is the additional police officers.
Police officers.
And this year, we did not have, I think as we know, we did not have the full complement of police officers this year because they're still in the hiring process.
So this is part of the rationality for hiring additional officers. And those, the funding of that, we discussed, other funding can come from the LIT accounts.
Correct. It can come from other funds, yes.
Okay, very good. So we're really talking about a $2.7 million projected reduction based on this.
It's the SB 1 impact is based on the property tax and those assessed valuations. That impact is $3 million. The deficit, you can say that the deficit is 2.7, which is coming from expenses. But then on top of that is the 3 million for the SB 1 impact.
SB 1 is a line item. Where is it charged? Is it charged as a circuit breaker cost?
SB 1, it will just be taken off the top of the property tax dollars that we would otherwise receive.
In the same way that the circuit breaker is taken off the top?
Yes,
So is it treated in this, in the same line item, or is it treated separate?
it will be treated the same, as I understand it, how they're planning to handle it.
So the answer to that question is yes, it will be treated as part of the circuit breaker pullback.
Correct.
Thank you. Wendy, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. We really don't know how it's gonna be presented yet. They haven't issued the forms yet, so.
By the way, is Chuck participating?
He is online now.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure.
He just got on. He was having trouble connecting.
I am
Okay.
here now. Yes, I can hear right now.
Okay,
And
good.
you can
Thank
see
you.
everything, you're good? Oh, there you are. I can see you. Nobody else can, but
Okay.
Trust me, he's here.
Okay, very good. I'm here.
Okay, anything else on this? I want to show you just this. This is for reference purposes. Give you a sense of the taxes. First one here is a pie chart that shows general fund revenue sources. So what are the revenue sources that we have for the general fund? This is based off fiscal year 2025 budget, not actual, but budget. So the total general fund revenue is $8.5 million. I'm just showing here that 65% of that is from taxes. And not just property taxes, it's from general fund property taxes, financial institution tax, the auto excise tax, and the commercial vehicle tax. And as you can see, most of that by far in the tax category is coming from property taxes. And we also get revenue for charges, services, licenses and permits. Of course, we have miscellaneous. We get some money from intergovernmental and fines and forfeitures. So that just gives you a sense of where the revenue comes from the general fund. And then this is property tax revenue by fund. So we get property tax revenue. What funds does the property tax go into? We receive a total of about $14 million in property taxes. 38% of that goes into the general fund. 28% goes to pay for municipal bonds and interest. We also have 3% that goes into the redevelopment bonds and interest, 20% parks funds, 8% capital, capital, 2% MVH, and then 1% for redevelopment operating. So this is just kind of reference background where the money comes and goes. I want to touch on this because I think the staff has done a good job so far this year in trying to find ways to save money. So saving money isn't something we do once a year when we talk about the budget. It's something that we should do and we have been doing on an ongoing basis. And this is something we discuss on a pretty regular basis at our staff meeting. We talk about operations. What can we do to improve them? So these are areas where we've already done some things to save money. I won't go through all of them now, but I will say a lot of this is coming from Public Works. Bob has been able to identify areas of work where they can able to take some of the work in-house, and that can save quite a bit of money. A good example is the raised crosswalks. You had your crews remove the crosswalks, right? Originally that would have been outsourced, but Bob knows his guys can do some of this work, so he's allowing them to do it and saving us some money. Any questions on this? Okay, so now we'll jump into the meat of what we're going to talk about. So as I said, this is a slightly updated version of what I sent you on.
Jim, before you go there, just going back to the property tax chart diagram. Do you have a total expenses for the town? How that these property taxes that we bring in, there's still additional revenue or additional expenses that we have that's covered by enterprise zones and everything else. So is our budget maybe closer to $20 million when it's all said and done?
If you're talking about the general fund, but between, yes, it would be, this is not,
Expenditures.
right, this is just the revenue side, it's not taking into account. Well, I guess my question is, are you talking about the general fund or all of our property tax fund?
I'm just talking about all of property tax revenue, but when we start talking about our total expenses for the town, it's much larger than $14 million. Is that correct?
Else on that, Chuck?
I'm sorry, what?
Anything else on that?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
All right, so, cost savings option. Staff has talked about this, several times, started. Actually, I think a month after I started here, Tricia had already told the department heads to be ready to discuss cost savings options at that time, so we had an initial conversation at the staff meeting. And it was just a brainstorming session. We asked them all, throw out any ideas you may have on how we can save money. So this is the initial list we came up with, and I met with Tricia and Wendy, and we went through it, refined it, and then organized it, categorized it. And then we talked about this list a couple more times with the staff and made some updates. And then started putting numbers to these. So cost savings options, like I said, these are categorized in different areas. Then we have dollar amounts. Depending on what the cost savings option is, some of these are hard numbers, some of them are estimates, because that's all we can do right now. But we did want to populate this with as many numbers as we could, to give a sense of what the savings might be. We have a column here, the impact, and this is just to give a sense of, based on a dollar amount, what would the financial impact be to help save some money? And the range with the threshold we have in here is anything less than $50,000 is considered a low impact, anything from $50,000 to $200,000 is considered a medium impact, and anything above $200,000 is a high impact. So as we go through these, you'll see most of these are low impact. There's not very many high impact. I'll jump to staff priority. We assess the priority on these 1 through 3, and that basically means how feasible is it to implement these cost savings measures. So you see a 1 here, those are cost savings measures that are relatively easy and simple. It's something that we could pretty quickly implement. 2s and 3s require a little bit more work. There may be more involved to be able to do it. We may have to do some more research to determine how feasible it is, what would it take, and what would the actual cost savings be. The 3s are items that really aren't feasible. Again, we asked the departments to throw everything out there. We wanted to get the list together, even though we know it's something that really may not be feasible, or even if it is feasible, it may be something that we really don't want to have to do. But we should still put it on the list to consider it. So the ones that you see with a 3 here are probably those that, yeah, it's on there, but do we really want to do it? Yeah, it's on there, but really, how feasible it is. And then we just have some notes here, kind of explaining some of these. Now, what I really want to concentrate on today is conversation with the council on this list and what is your priority? What are the items here that you think we should really focus on? Are there items on here you want us to eliminate entirely? We don't want to consider that at all for whatever reason.
I mean, the first thing I'm looking at fire hose testing, it's $11,000, but how much money are we spending in equipment purchases? You know what I'm saying? So is it,
Just real quick, it's gonna cost about $6,800 for the pump. About another $1,000 to $2,000 for the calipers that we need. And then it's manpower intensive. We're
so
gonna
the
save
5 years, how much are you saving in 5 years?
maybe $3,000.
And that's why it's ranked as a
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah, and that's what you asked, and I'm just,
Right.
yeah, that was my first one I saw.
I'm not gonna go through these one by one, but the question is, of these, which ones do you feel we really need to pursue?
I think early retirement.
Well, I'm gonna weigh in here. I think what I'd like to do is say, Jim, I'd like you to prepare a plan, picking from the list that you created, what you believe would make sense, what would be feasible in terms of your conversations with the department heads, and then present them to us. We'll go through this and pick all these. I think throwing this back to council and say, what do you like, and what do you want to get rid of? You know, candidly, I don't do this, David. You're the one that's doing it, so I'd like your record. Come up with a plan and give it to us so that we have some focus as opposed to us throwing darts. That's just my thoughts.
Well, we are planning on doing that, but I'm looking for some direction from you. I don't wanna, spend time calculating some of these numbers, pursuing it, if it's something you definitely do not want us to pursue. So I'm looking for some, initial, response from you on what you want us to focus on. There's a- Go ahead.
If I could say something here. I honestly think in, 4 through 7 there, the items that the department heads have listed as number 1. I'm very comfortable in looking at all what number 4 of those number 1s. I think that makes sense. I am hesitant, and I think I will talk a little bit later about the cost of living increase, because I think that can be grouped into more of a salaries and benefits for employees. And I think that should be looked at in general. I'd like to see a cost of living increase for our employees each year. But the other 3 items that are on this list, I think make a lot of sense. But again, the cost of living increase, I want to talk about as in terms of health benefits and other things too. So I'll hold off a little bit more on my comments, but I think the things that the department heads have listed there make a lot of sense.
Tim, based on what you put together, is it possible to balance the budget between costs?
Just on these alone?
Yes.
No, because there's not enough money here.
Because I'm looking at $1 million.
And again, not all these numbers, a lot of these numbers are estimates, so they might be higher or lower than what we're showing.
They don't necessarily impact the funds that are affected by SEA one.
Four on the first page, another million on the second page. So it's 2.4, 2.5 million cost cutting total. On this. So right here as well.
And well, but again, these numbers, these are overall savings across all the funds that the town has, including the water utility, the sewer. Those things that are not impacted by SEA one. I think later you'll see of these cost savings, which ones actually help the property tax funds, the general fund, the one that has to address the
Yes.
3.3 million. It can get confusing because government doesn't do accounting the way the rest of the world does, where we have to keep things in these separate buckets.
Well, are there any in here in particular you want to discuss, or any in here in particular you want us to rule out or concentrate on, or do you want us to consider all of them?
I would consider
No,
the medians and the highs. Jonathan, what do you think? I mean,
I want to see a proposal. I mean, look. I run a business, George, you run a business. When revenues are less than your expenditures, you gotta tighten your belt. I have another question. This is your first pass at cost cutting. It'd be worthwhile to go back in and ask, what else? Is there other things that we could add to this list? I mean, I've worked in big corporations. I recall what it was like when I was in my 30s. I had to participate in this. Go to the different staff, department heads. They're going to give you the stuff that they're comfortable getting rid of. Sometimes there's stuff that they don't want to get rid of that could be considered. And that's where it takes somebody like you to go in and say, well, what about this? We need to put this on the line and consider it. See them squiggle, see them wiggle a little bit, but it's fair game. And you're telling me you don't have enough cost cutting here. Maybe we got to go back and have another round of this.
But running a business and a municipal are two different things. You and I could raise our rates. As a municipal, we can't raise our rates.
That's why we
And then
have,
there's different funds. I think what we really need to concentrate on is the general fund, correct me if I'm wrong. That is the fund that we really need to look at. All the other funds are gonna be fine. It's the general.
And
but I would tend to agree with that because of the TIF funding formula. We have greater flexibility nowadays because of our ability to pay police and fire salaries through TIF. That gives us some cushion. But I'm still hearing, I believe I heard this, you don't have enough cost cutting here to match the deficit. And I think it's probably worth another pass. The department heads say, okay, you told me what you're comfortable with. What are you uncomfortable with? Take another pass. I think there may be other things here that could be put on this list that could reasonably be considered when we're upside down like this.
And you're probably right, there are other things, we just haven't gotten to the point, what you're talking about is a whole nother exercise that we will do with the departments and sit down with, their key employees and talk about, okay, how do you do this? What are your operations? What are your supplies? And just talk through that in more detail to find those areas where we may be able to save some additional money.
Okay.
That's a good exercise to do. That wasn't part of what we're trying to do today. We haven't had time to do that. This is more of a higher level review of where we're at. But again, cost savings is an ongoing basis. So even though we may not be able to do that exercise now or in time for the final budget, it's something I would want to do in the coming months. And it is something that we should do on an ongoing basis. We just haven't performed that exercise at this time.
If I could make a suggestion, it was in the year of 2024 that we added the additional police officers. We added additional people in public works. We added additional people, authorized people in Parks Department. We authorized additional people in the Clerk Treasurer's office. I think it's important that we look at, say, for instance, the last 2 or 3 years of total salaries for our town. And we can see where they've increased over the last couple of years, and also look at total compensation, meaning health benefits also. I think there is where we can start looking at where we could reduce, because that, I don't know for sure what the number is, but probably out of the general fund, probably 75 to 80% of it is salaries. And I think that's where the real tough decisions are going to be made. And I think the more we can get more information about where we have been historically and where we are going in the future, because this year is a big reduction in property taxes, but in years 2 and 3 from now, it's going to potentially be even worse. So I think that type of number that we could have, and looking at total compensation, including salaries and also health benefits. It was 2 or 3 years ago that we reduced the amount that employees have to pay for health benefits. Maybe we have to go back to the previous way of doing that. So the town has less of a contribution to the health benefits. But I think that's the numbers. And I sent an email to Tricia, Wendy, and Jim, and I'm not sure if you've had enough time to review that. But is that something that you think could be helpful for the council? And I agree with Councilor Peterson, Councilor Schinkin, that again, this is a big thing for us to look at. And the more information that we can have, the better off we're going to be to make a logical decision or a contemplation of what we need to do in the future.
Health insurance.
We use the AIM medical
Okay,
price.
so
Yeah, you can't beat it.
So what's?
But we do have, if you want to talk medical insurance, we do have the best plan available, both in the PPO and the high deductible. We offer 2 different plans to our employees. It's cheaper to the town if we went to the high deductible HSA. That's one of the things on here. Is this something that the council would like to encourage, promote, incentivize? Is that something that you want to move everybody there? do we want to shift from the best plan to the second best or third best plan?
And what is that? Yeah, let's look at the cost savings.
Well, the cost savings, if we move to the next level of health insurance, is on here, increase, let's see. I don't know where it's at on the list, but if there was a number assigned to it,
Do the employees have a choice?
they can go high deductible or PPO. That's their choice.
They don't have an HSA choice.
That's the high deductible.
And then how much are they paying out?
It depends on the individual and whether you're an employee or employee spouse, employee family, employee and children. We have 4 different levels of health insurance.
I mean, I'm looking at close to 300,000 increase in health insurance contributions, 20%.
Yeah, is that something that you are interested in doing? We had been at 85% and
The
then,
employer was paying 17.5%. It had been at 20%. And this does look at the idea of what if we went back to the 20% employee match, and the idea that Wendy was describing, incentivize people going on to the high deductible plan.
That's what they do.
There's a string of things, insurance related that are on this list about how do we incentivize people to perhaps get off the town's insurance plan, go on their spouse's plan? How can we change the plan, change the benefit of it?
and is that something the counselors want us to, it's a lot of number, what if, and, you know, to get to that point, is that what you want? Do you want to charge the employees another 10% for their health insurance after we had gone back? It's what do you, that's
I'd
the
like to know
purpose
what
of
those
this.
numbers look like, though, the 10%. You know, obviously, we want to do things that are gonna be ruffle the least amount of feathers, but be the most impactful. And, you know, you look at these low impact things, or you look at the medium impact things, and you don't want to compromise the beauty of the town, you know, by stop fertilizing or, you know, what this type of thing. You don't want to like take away from the employees to a level that they start looking for a new job. Or, you know, ticking off the residents because they feel like, you know, we're tightening their belt too tight. That, you know, something like the insurance topic, if that's something that can save some significant money, I mean, you know, topics of closing the pool or these big ticket things. I mean, that's, you know, stuff I don't think is really, or close the golf course. I don't think those are like viable, but.
That's why we're meeting today.
Yeah.
Like, let us know that, we can cross
And
it off the
there's
list.
ways
I-
to better run the golf course that, you know, that we're looking for currently.
And Joe, we do have numbers on some of those you mentioned, so if we made it mandatory to participate in the HSA insurance plan, we're talking a savings of $126,000. If we increase the employee health insurance contribution to 20%, we're talking $230,000.
But I want to see the employee side. I mean, is it going to be shocking when they got to sit down? Or is it going to be like, well, I understand what's going on and we know we're going to have to make some changes. You know, so yeah, I appreciate those numbers. But those are significant, those values are, you know. Now, these companies that we use, the SEH, the Midwest, I mean, is there retainer money in that, or is this just paid for service?
I don't think there's any retainer. I think it's just hourly rate.
Again, one of my suggestions would be to say, hey, we have to find, say, $500,000 to $750,000 in personnel savings this next year. And I would almost go through an a la carte listing, much like you did here, and have each department head give you 2 different people from each of their departments, or 1 or 2 or 3 people from each of their departments, and go through these numbers. Very similar to what the school town, from my understanding, does when they have salary discussions coming up. They only have a certain amount of money that they can spend. So they say to their collective bargaining group that they meet with, they're not a union, but it's a bargaining group of teachers, I guess. And they say, do you want higher stipends for football coaches? Or do you want higher stipends for extracurricular activities? Or do you want more better health benefits? Or do you want a better salary? And you know, the health benefits that the school town of Munster pays are different than what the school town Lake Central school system does. And I think what we do is try to figure out what our optimal goal here is. I do not want to cut staff, but I do think we have to look at some of these health benefits and say, what is the best way to make these things work? You know, some things are relatively minor, you know, the accident-free days, perfect attendance days, but again, we also have, you know, that's one department gets those, the other departments don't get those days. So we need to kind of work at this all together, but I think it is trying to come up with some type of number that we're trying to shoot for, that we're going to save in personnel costs throughout the year. And maybe we still increase salaries, but the savings that we can get from different insurance plans might work. But again, I don't know that offhand, but that's how I would look at the personnel, is group all these things together and get a group of 15 to 20 employees that we work with and say, hey, you know, we want to pass these ideas along to you. So it's not a shock when it gets to the, you know, December 31st.
Level of, as you're running a town, I mean, redundancy or unnecessary stuff that's done multiple times, that we're kind of just streamlining things, or people doing multiple, you know, we kind of streamlining to the department versus the state money. I mean,
Well, there's always that possibility, yeah, and that's something.
We have some of those ideas on here as well, ways to consolidate and different ways we could approach things.
You had mentioned the golf course and pool. So are there any items on here that you just want to rule out entirely? I mean, this is a big list. I'd like to cross off the items that, you know, everybody agrees that we just can't do that or don't want to do that for whatever reason.
I would say that closing the pool and closing the golf course are no to me.
How much money are we using on both?
I believe that the next golf course contract that we have will be a much more conducive contract to the town than the previous contract that we've had.
Money we make on the pool. And how many Munster residents are using it? I mean, that's something to look at.
Pool basically breaks even other than capital improvement costs. We're right about there.
What percentage of the year is that?
Small plus or minus. Residents for non-residents, I'd say you're almost 50-50. What you use based upon season pass holders or daily admission.
Can we increase pool prices? I mean, can we increase parking at Centennial? I mean, I go to Whiting Park, I'm paying $35 for a day. You know? I mean, Munster residents, you got 2 cars that could use that park. I mean, let's make some money off of non-residents.
I have a question. Is there a way to automate parking fee charges? Maybe it's a different part.
You can do it on an app.
Well, because I get calls from residents from time to time, that they dinged with parking fee charges. I think I heard the council president, we want to charge people that aren't paying the property taxes and come to use our parks. We're glad to have them and we welcome them. But pay a fair share. But at the same time, I mentioned, and I know you've helped a couple residents that got dinged, who have issues, problems registering their vehicles. I just wonder if there's a more robust way of doing this to eliminate unnecessary work, which is chasing residents, going after the non-residents, and our goal to have them pay their fair share. You know, is there an alternative?
I think, I mean, there's always ways to make improvements, but I think that, you know, we allow this year 4 vehicles per household for residents to register. So, I mean, most residents have done that. I think if the learning curve of this is our 4th year of being out there is the biggest thing that we're fighting, and the reminder that people do need to register every year because vehicles change, people move in town, people move out of town. So I think that's a big area there. Typically most residents should not be paying the park. If they get a ticket, we typically, clear it for them because they either aren't registered in the system or maybe they typoed their license plate.
You remember I had that problem.
Yeah, we'll get that. I mean, there's people who do make honest mistakes that way. We'll help them out with that. But, I mean, we can raise the fees, I think, on, that it's $2 an hour, $5 all day. It can definitely be raised. I think the challenge of anything that's not a mandate, though, somewhere in there, you start to say, okay, I'm not forced to go to the park, right? I don't have to pay that money. And then they just stop going. And then that's lost revenue entirely. So I think that's the uniqueness in parks and recreation, program wise, facilities like that. Same thing. We could raise pool fees to $30 a person. At some point, people just start saying, I don't need to go to a pool that day. And that's lost revenue. So there are those trade-offs. I mean, can they be incrementally raised? I think we're looking at that constantly. And that's one that will be not only for those facilities, but even renting of shelters or the social center or anything else that we have. But somewhere in there, we got to find the mix that, okay, what's that tipping point where we don't lose a whole bunch of customers?
Now, shelter rentals, is it the same for everybody, or must the residents get a break?
It is the same for everybody on shelter residents. I'm sorry, there is a non-resident rate for shelter residents. Non-residents can also only rent shelters at 3 different parks or 3 biggest ones. But again, our overall income from shelter rentals is not a huge number. I mean, people want indoor plumbing, they want air conditioning, they want heat, they want, those comforts. If you're gonna have that big event for your kid, have all this food coming and drink coming and all these guests coming and it rains, that's a bad thing. So people don't always do those kinds of activities outside of the park.
You know, how many season passes do you guys sell at the pool?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look back and see what we had.
Go to the model like Planet Fitness where you're selling passes and only a percentage show up. More like to make it.
I think most of the ones who do come and get passes do use it. As we've raised our fees, we've noticed that some people have told us that they're not gonna get a pass because they won't go enough visits to make it worth it. They'll just pay the daily admission. So again, there's that tipping point where you gotta figure out what's best for you. Also, because it's a relatively short season. I mean, we were supposed to be open 11 weeks this year. The first week we didn't even open because it was too cold. If you remember Memorial Day weekend, it was cold in the 60s. So.
Questions, Tom?
I'd like to just point out in our section, we said one of them is stop paying ourselves for water. If you're not aware, we do pay ourselves for water bills and all of our facilities, pool, social center, drinking fountains, shelter, bathrooms, things like that. That would be a shift that there is an opportunity there. Tricia could probably better explain that than I can, but we're projecting, $75,000.
Yeah, we had a brief conversation before the meeting actually started, that idea came up.
Where does that revenue, what fund does that revenue go?
It would go into the water cash operating, fund.
And what's the available use of that fund?
The water cash operating fund.
Yes.
It's to be used for the water utility only, so it's paying for the salaries for all the vehicles, the operations of water maintenance and water billing.
That would help the park fund, but it would add more burden to the water operating fund, is what you're saying.
It would be a direct reduction of revenue into the water cash operating fund. Yes.
Is that a surplus every year? Or is it zero out?
It usually has a balance available at the end of the year.
What's typically the balance?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, and it's hard to say right now because we're in the process of committing funds for the bond. So that's going to reduce what that is available. I don't think that it would be detrimental to the water fund to not be receiving that $75,000.
What fund is that 75,000 come out of?
It's in Mark's instance, what he's talking about, it would be the park fund. And then the other fund that pays that is the general fund. So the two funds that we're talking about that have to bear the brunt of SCA one.
In something like that, if it's a short-term situation, I can see that, but again, I tend to, that's going right back onto our residents then, that if our water fund goes low, then we're adding more fees to the water fund. I do like, and maybe it's a reduced rate, maybe we can come to something that's at cost rather than not, something else, but from my theory of what this, of trying to build efficiencies and then waiving that fund kind of contradicts each other, but I certainly understand that would be a big help in the short term to meet some immediate needs.
And the council has, on prior occasions,
Yeah.
waived the town paying itself for the water. When there were issues with the general fund specifically, and during COVID was the most recent time it happened. As a cost savings measure, and it was a temporary thing, and council actually took an action saying, yes, for this period of time, we will waive it.
I kind of like a temporary aspect to that because I think that allows, because a lot of things that I'm thinking about, and even when we get into the revenue part of it all, there needs to be some cost studies done. So we know what we're charging, know what our actual costs are. And I don't think those can be taken care of in the next 2 months. I think if we look at a temporary, temporary pause on that for maybe 3 years, that allows us really to look at the other parts of our budget to get it back in order. And it doesn't make an undue burden on the water operating fund for those 3 years. And then we get it back going. So I could see a temporary pause in those type of things going back to the water operating fund.
Revenues. So here we have a list of new sources of revenues and some revenues that we already have in place that we can increase. Big one here is the food and beverage tax, got 1%. That wouldn't take effect until 2027, but we have to do some additional analysis on that.
The increase on wheel surtax on motorcycles and motorbikes, that wouldn't take effect until 27 as well, correct? We couldn't get that in for 26. It's not a lot of money if I.
Correct. It's right now,
That's
it's a $7.50 charge. It could go up to $25. And we do not at this point have the data to know how many motorcycles would there be in town that this would impact.
And that was an action of council.
Correct. There would be an ordinance that would have to be adopted by September 1st of next year to go into effect for 2027.
Another one here that should be considered is imposing a local tax to replace Lost County LIT. This is a new revenue. It's replacing what's going to be lost. So as it mentions here, it's really revenue neutral. That wouldn't take effect until 2020.
My feeling on these revenue sources, one, I think these other type of fees, the rental permit fee, parking fees, social center, police fire alarm fees, I think all those fees should be reviewed on a 2-year, at least a 2-year basis. And we need to know what the costs are for some of those things, especially when it comes to business registration fee and things like that. So I think those should be reviewed. I don't know enough about the inner workings of the town, if any of them are too low or too high, but one, I think those type of fees should be reviewed on a regular basis. And I think some of those fees don't get reviewed enough. So I think that reviewing those fees makes sense. When it comes to the food and beverage tax and county LIT, how do we end up using those funds? And certainly future research and additional research has to be done on those. So I think we can't take those off the table right now, but a lot of additional research need to be done with those things to understand how we could use the money, especially food and beverage tax. Is that a general fund funding mechanism, or is that for something special? So I think that's what I would say about those two things. And then there's also the other opportunity of sponsorship and signage and revenue generating facilities that we really got to look at how we do, how we operate that stuff. I know there is some potential sponsorship or signage that we could do, but again, it's relatively low dollar amount unless we really, we have to look at what's our opportunities first before we get into that area.
Beverage tax is primarily used for parks and economic development. So that would have our parks department. That's what they've been approving it for downstate.
Not in general.
But parks are property tax
Yes,
supported,
right,
so.
Exactly.
So if we support the park fund, then they would not need as much property tax, and it can move into the general.
Exactly.
Yeah. They jump from one to the other.
And the LIT, that would be the existing LIT for public safety under SEA 1 ends in 2027. It just goes away completely. What this is about here on, it would be, we would then have the opportunity to do our own LIT that would be used specifically for public safety. So it would just be to replace that so that that fund can continue to do what it's doing to help support public safety.
And the LIT public safety is paying for,
It is paying for the crossing guards, it pays for ammo, and it's paying in part for the body cameras.
the body cameras.
The body cameras, the body cameras and the crossing guards are the two big expenditures out of that fund.
So as it goes away, is it approximately the same number?
That we don't, the state doesn't even have the data that they can give us for us to make the calculations on what those will be. We are hopeful that they will have that to us within a year. Under SEA 1, we can't even begin that process until 2027.
County knows what your county income is, they don't know it by municipalities, that's the issue. We pay a county tax on it, and they just have to break it down.
Right.
By cities and towns, yeah.
If they can, if they said 3.3 million, is there a best case scenario number?
0.
That's highly,
That would be our-
but is it like less than $1 million? Did they say anything like that?
They did not provide
It's
that.
just like scaring the hell.
They provided
There's-
worst case, they provided worst case scenario.
Hopefully we'll all be partying by the end of. Party like it's 1990.
Well, my guess is it's gonna end up somewhere between the figures that they put out while they were debating SEA 1 and this worst case scenario. But
They gotta give you worst case.
we don't, right, and we will not know the final numbers until April, when property tax bills are generated and they know, and the counties have actually put it through. That's when we'll know. So there's a certain amount of, we have to make assumptions now.
Yes.
But how are we going to address it?
And there may be some additional changes to the legislation that could affect the calculation.
They're working on that for next session, so we don't know how that'll impact us, so.
What did they work?
Well, just technical tweaks to what they've done, or figuring out this isn't gonna work, let's try. So there's, AIM is lobbying for municipalities right now on a list of topics. We've got a 4-pronged approach, which we'll probably hear more about at the Idea Summit, but they're trying to help municipalities.
Is there a way to look at it, like to just look at every department and come up with a goal number of like, we need to cut this per department, 3%, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
That's one way of doing it. I mean, you could say that across the board, everybody's gonna cut 3%. Again, that's one way of doing it.
Is that gonna hit the number though?
Not necessarily.
Because of property tax. money. SCA one is property tax. money.
Certainly go through these items. We should always consider our fees and costs. Whether we're recouping our full costs and are our fees in line with what they should be, are they comparable to what other communities charge? So we'll certainly go through those, see if we have to make any adjustments.
Are we cheap? Rental permit fees.
Well, I think,
I would love to increase the rental permit.
I mean, do annual inspections, annual stuff like that. I mean, what do you take ahead? What do we need to do? That's the state,
You can't, it's once.
can't ram into the door.
Some things are governed by state law, some of these.
The state statute doesn't allow you to do that inspection. And it's once.
But is it, can you do it tenant to tenant as leases are renewed?
No.
Is the town able to get, like, do we have any access to the leases? To see like when there's new tenants or?
Well, they're supposed to keep up with the tenant change. They're supposed to keep that on file. Now, does that happen? No. That's not gonna help do anything because we can't charge again for that rental extension.
So you could only get the rental fee once,
Correct.
not per.
It's once in a lifetime now. That changed
Why
like
my
Dave, 6
neighbors-
years ago. About that changed.
Well, before that, 7 years ago.
Now increasing that one-time permit fee, that's a possibility, but I don't think you're gonna capture it.
No, you're not gonna catch a squat. By running, yeah. Yeah, we can.
I'll reach out to cost of the items. So these are some areas where maybe we're not receiving the money we should, the services we provide. So for instance, for, providing services to third parties, we should charge for that. One example I put in here is, there are some properties that we believe is owned by Nikki, but we're mowing their lawn. We're gonna have a conversation about that, try to stop doing that, but if there's instances like that, or if there's graffiti that needs to be removed on Nikki property, they should be doing that. But if they don't do it soon enough, then we may want to go out there and remove it. And that the cost we're incurring, that we should charge back to Nikki. So those are some examples, outsourcing plan reviews. We're incurring a cost for plan reviews, by having, another engineering firm or another company review it. We should make sure we're getting paid for that cost. Charts to, prepare legal documents. So, an example is we're gonna negotiate a lease with AT&T to put equipment on our cell tower. Well, Dave's gonna have to review that lease. That's gonna take some time. Is that a cost we should maybe charge back to AT&T? As one example here. We're not charging employees, for a round of golf. It's about $90,000. So should we charge them for that? But that's another, related to personnel question. It's a perk, it's a benefit. Is that something that we want to take away? Is it worth taking away?
We want to charge $10 instead of 32, what would,
Discount
what,
rate.
Discount rate.
You're gonna make me pay for golf and increase my insurance premium.
Hey, you hit the ball better. The way you hit a ball, and I wish I had your swing. I was just joking, Happy.
So just pointing this out, this is another area we talked about. That was on the list to make sure that we're covering all the costs.
So we're looking at reducing stuff, but all that is really not a dent. So what could happen to us next year?
Well, then that brings us into, some scenarios. So,
I think this is the numbers probably that you're looking for, it's just kind of implemented.
right, so we're talking about all these cost savings and revenue generation options. You could combine those in, a multitude of ways to get to different numbers. And, we're not prepared to do all of that, but we can look in a broad sense. If we made some changes, what would that look like for the deficit? How would it carry out in future years? So this first row here is, what if we just stayed status quo? We didn't raise any fees, we didn't take any actions to save money, and revenues and expenses just increase by a certain percentage as they, normally would. We assumed a 5% increase in revenues, a 6% increase in expenditures. But then what do we do with Senate Bill 1, that revenue loss? Is it gonna go up or down every year? There's no way of knowing that. Okay, so we said, well, let's just keep the number we're using as a worst case scenario and keep that stagnant over the next 5 years. Knowing it's not gonna be that number, but what number do you throw in there? But this is just to give you a sense, if everything stayed status quo, where would we be with the deficit in coming years? So right now, we're looking at a deficit, $5.7 million. And this shows you how it would carry forward in the coming years if we do anything based on the assumption we're making. So in 2030, we were looking at a $6.8 million deficit. One way to address that is to implement the high priority cost savings. How would that play out? So if we implemented the high priority cost savings for 2026, that would give us $505,000 as a cost savings that would carry through in future years at a 5% increase. So that would reduce our deficit in 2026 from 5.7 to 5.1. By 2030, we would reduce it from 6.8 to 6.2. And then another scenario is, what if we, in addition to the high priority cost savings, what if we implemented new revenues? So that's what we have here, the high priority cost savings of $505,000. In new revenues at $88,000. How would that carry forward? So that shows you here that the deficit in 2026 would go down to 5 million. In 2030, it would knock it down to 6.1 million. So this shows you, even if we make these changes in cost savings or revenues, it's not gonna, that alone obviously is not gonna reduce the deficit. So it's gonna take much more than that. So then we go to this option here, which is, what if we charge more of our expenditures in the police department over to the TIF? In particular, if we charge payroll for patrols, instead of charging that to the general fund, we charge that to the TIF. What would that look like? And that's what it's showing here. So it would get us out of our deficit in the first year and would help reduce the deficit significantly in future years. It wouldn't entirely eliminate the deficit. And of course, this is based on these assumptions here. But by 2030, we still have a deficit, but it would be much less at about $680,000.
So how much of that, are we completely eliminating the tip then? Will it be eliminated by 2030? All tip.
There you go.
Thank you.
So these are the projections of where we would be with the TIF by 2036 at the time it expires. Making assumptions, this is based on the Baker Tilly revenue estimates, which was done previously, the known debt payments that we have to make, the costs that we would expect to incur and pay out of the TIF for the Ridge Road improvements. And then we have to make some assumptions. If we can reimburse the developers for economic development improvements new developments, we have to consider that. How much do you put in that column for that? Well, we don't know. We have to pick a number again. So we put $750,000 and carry that forward to the stagnant number throughout the rest of the TIF. Same thing here. If we're going to make improvements to public lands, and if we're gonna be more aggressive in buying property for development, we're gonna incur those costs. We put $500,000 in here throughout the life of the TIF. We're already paying, police vehicles out of the TIF, 2025, $800,000. We're told that the police department expects to spend another $600,000 in 2026. And they do have a vehicle replacement plan. And these are the numbers they gave us for future years on what they're gonna purchase, vehicles out of the TIF, $300,000 in 27, $150,000 in 28. And there's gonna be a large replacement that they plan in 2031 of $3.6 billion. So that's included in here as well. And then, as we mentioned, if we take the cost for payroll, patrol payroll out of the TIF district, that's what this column is.
Now, when you say patrol, do you mean just our sworn officers on the road?
Just those who are assigned patrol, does not include admin, it doesn't include the cop program, it doesn't include investigation.
That's what I just want to make sure we
Your
clarify.
patrol, yes, it is strictly patrol officer.
We'll make sure it's apples to apples.
Yes, yep. If you're familiar, it's program 204. That's the program for payroll.
So that's roughly 30 to 35 officers?
Yes, roughly. So based on all these numbers, when we carry that out, this shows you the impact it's gonna have on the debt balance. So by 2031, we're gonna have a deficit in the debt fund based on this scenario. That increases to $130,000 by the end of the TIF in 2036.
So that's a snapshot of what it would be making these assumptions.
Obviously, these assumptions can be changed a variety of different ways. That's going to affect the number.
I just want to think that if you're assuming reimbursing the developers like to the tune of $750,000 a year for whatever, 2027 to 2036, you're probably entering into some development agreements, probably going to then generate more economic development, right? So your numbers, your revenue number is going to go up by whatever the increase in assessed value times the percentage. So I get it, it's an estimate, but if you're gonna include a column here, you probably got to try to estimate some increase on the left hand
What
side.
would that column be?
Yeah.
We didn't.
David,
Not-
good point,
not-
thank you.
And the only projection they did was for, the known things from our,
Maple. Yes.
Centennial Village
Yes,
one.
yes.
Because Baker Tilly wasn't taking into account the thought of, they were looking at what was known to be actively happening, not the idea of what might we potentially go after.
Right.
Can I pose another question? Mr. Weston, please. That's a good point that you made. Right now, a substantial portion of our current Ridge Road Calumet TIF has been overlaid by the TOD.
Right.
Now, we still have an opportunity to negotiate payout of those funds, but we got another party involved in that. Is that correct?
Right.
The RDA.
So and so a caveat to what I just said is if your increase in development is in the TOD, that's gonna get captured by that. So it would be economic, I guess, to really, but, you know, to do an incentive out of there, like the idea would be, you probably wouldn't have anything in the reimbursed developers, because it would all be out of that
So
column.
we maybe set up two columns, TOD account column, and then here's where I'm going with the question. Are there any limitations on us creating new TIF districts?
No, I mean, you have the typical, right? You need areas that qualify, but we could certainly do that. I mean, I don't, I'd have to look at the area you're referring to, like specifically, but
Speaking hypothetically.
hypothetically, there's. You may, now we even have residential tips, right? But we don't really have. I suppose that new property that was bought by community hospital could turn into a residential TOD if they come in with a plan. I guess you're only limited, Jonathan, by developers wanting to develop, right? Like that's your big limitation. You gotta get them interested and where are they gonna, where are they gonna go and where do you have interest for people to go?
Well,
And have it outside the TOD to really move that needle.
we're in a happier situation than other communities like Cherville, where they've got shopping malls with vacant buildings.
There's no doubt about that.
We don't have any of that right now, meaningfully, other than maybe the Harley Davidson. Okay, thank you.
But that's, yeah, so we'd have to, and, I'd have to look at. I'd have to see the map, right, because it's within a radius of those stations. And then we kind of, my recollection is that we drew the one to come down and grab, them, right?
Yes.
So,
Chuck, are you still on the line?
Yes.
What's your sense on the TOD negotiation? You've had interaction with the RDA folks. You think they're gonna play ball with us?
I don't really quite understand the TOD money that we receive is what I really want to figure out how we can spend that. There's probably a little bit of public safety that could be part of that, but again, that's part of what I think we should have further discussions with the RDA on some of these things. And also I think we need to really look at the development, especially Centennial Village, which I'm very disappointed that that's taken so long. That is in the, that's TIF money. That's also TOD money that could be a benefit to us in the long term. Again, I don't think it's the cure all, but I think it is something that we need to be looking at.
well, it's certainly something that you need to look at in light of, and I can't read it from here, but 2020, 30, whatever it is, that you're now in the red, right? Like, so and we've said this all along, that you've got to find an income source to replace that revenue, right? Like that is now being spent. You're fortunate that you have this surplus, but I've always been fearful about the surplus. If we didn't spend it, that the State Board of Accounts would come in and talk about the overlapping tax administration. So best thing would be we do some more economic development.
Mhm. And what if Warfel did come in and say he wanted to put a data center in? There's your money right there yearly. That's your pitfall right there if he decides to put a data center in.
So 2030, when it goes red here, does that mean all the tip areas are matured?
No, the TIF doesn't mature until 2037. This is just showing the impact that would happen based on all of these assumptions.
Okay, but does this, I don't see where tip money is coming in here. Do we know, I mean, it's going down, but I mean.
Right,
TIF
well,
money that comes in here-
the TIF money that's coming in is the estimate, that's that second column. That's showing what we estimate, what Baker Tilly estimated would come in
Oh,
each
okay.
year.
Okay.
And we can escalate that number, we'll put a formula in here to increase it.
Now,
So
is that
that-
interest too?
This is strictly the TIF principle.
What
This is
about our
just the principle.
interest? We put that in there?
We make any kind of assumptions
Yeah.
that we wanted to make.
It's less predictable anymore.
I mean, what do we make in a year on interest on this?
If the average over the past 3 years. Interest that we paid on that number.
We've got to show every revenue with this tip, that's including principal and interest.
So we'll update that, of course. But again, this was just to give a, reference point, standard,
Exactly. It
you know,
shows us
what the
We have some
forecast
work
may
to
be.
do.
I guess in looking at this, again, I don't know. I certainly appreciate the numbers and everything else, but I classify this as a last ditch effort. And I am not really comfortable with the TIF going into the red in 6 years. So again, I understand, I think what this is to show different options, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But again, this is what I almost, the last ditch effort. And I hopefully we can find ways to improve efficiencies and charge appropriately and get a better handle on our health employee benefits and all that other stuff first, I think, and make sure we understand what our costs of service are before we just start taking everything out of TIF money.
Look, and I do agree with you, because after 6 years, what do? All that tip money's gone, we're using it for the police, then what happens?
And again, I understand,
Worst
I think
scenario.
I understand what the reason for this graph is, and that's fine, but I think hopefully there's more of a hybrid solution to this than going to this option.
Dave, after when the tip expires, can it be renewed?
You can renew it, you can do a new TIF, right, like there
But you're starting at a new base then, right?
Much higher.
theoretically,
And you have to
and
go
it
from
depends
there.
on, right, like the area where you're at. I mean, if it's vacant, the best time to establish an allocation area or sub-allocation area is when the land's vacant, right? Like, because you've got the lowest and you capture all the growth, but yeah, there's gonna be options for that, but we're gonna have to be mindful of that, like going forward, and I don't, like brought up Centennial Village, there's the fact that there is not further development out there, we're losing. Right? And-
Should have been done 3 years ago.
And, we did take a look at that, and really, I think by any reading of those 4 development agreements, I think he's beyond the time, and in default, right? So my recommendation is that we at least start that conversation with him, because, you're losing significant dollars, right, by the fact that it's stagnant out there. Trying to be kind.
Yeah, I heard he gave up on Munster. He's working on his other 2 projects.
Is there any money to be recouped in that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, the best case scenario is you have a meeting and he kickstarts and he gets going, right, and then you get all the tip revenue. Worst case scenario is he thumbs his nose and you're forced with a decision to make, but, the town's invested somewhere between 12 and 14, I don't have the number right in front of me, but, and this was years ago, 12 and 14 million dollars in there, right? That, that was our benefit of the bargain. Or our part was giving him the 12 to 14 million, and the benefit of the bargain, we were supposed to get 3 segments of development done, conservatively factoring in COVID, by mid 2023, and he's done all of the first segment and part of the second segment. And again, I'm being generous in my reading of that, but, I didn't draft the document and the documents, and they're not the easiest to kind of get through, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And Miro will be done before he's done.
I will not.
This is what we have to show you. Anything in particular you want us to review or focus on, and how do we proceed with this next Wednesday when we have the first meeting on the budget? Tickets.
Lemonade.
Let's have a referendum.
What would, I mean, if this should never even was on the table, then this $3 million is not a property budget.
Probably wouldn't have much of an issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, we would be. We would not, well, we, right, we have the issue with the increased payroll costs. We would probably be looking to shift around where the tax levy is allocated. We would still be going through, looking at funding revenue streams and cost cutting, which, as we said, we do that repeatedly.
With this number, do we have any idea like how they even come up with this number of the max of $300 for the real estate?
The worst case scenario number that we're working with, that was developed by looking at every single parcel. And based on the data that they have about that parcel, knowing that the person that lives here is over 65, they are eligible for this, that, and the other exemption, and then running it through what SEA 1 tells them they have to do in terms of this exemption is rolling off, this one's coming on, and this is what it is. That's what they were basing it on. So they were looking at every single parcel. You get an extra circuit breaker discount at 65.
But isn't there an income provision on there?
Yeah, there is.
So you may make your income maybe too high.
It's not like we have a business and we can just raise our costs. We gotta look at.
Well, that 9, the 2025 Baker Tilly revenue estimate, is that what's currently in it right now?
So the 9 million is the amount we estimate receiving this year based on what our first half collections were. The rest of the numbers are the Baker Tilly estimates that they put out in April. We know that SEA 1 is gonna hit the TIF areas as well, which is why you see a drop in the amount. That was sort of the taking into account the idea that TIF revenues will take a hit because of SEA.
But there's already money in that. How much is it?
Where is it right now?
No, I don't. It's usually right around 26 million. is the
Right.
Number I usually throw
Yeah,
out.
it's
but
26, and that's what you're seeing in that very
Yeah,
last
last
column,
column
is the
is the-
accumulated,
Right,
what it is. The 31,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
that's
I was
taking
trying to figure
that.
out
yeah, so that's where it goes across, so.
Yep.
Then remember, we gotta take out our debt payments.
Right.
That's why
No,
it
that-
doesn't math like you're probably in.
Anyway,
We're adding 9 to 26.
This is why I'm
It's not
at-
equaling 31. Well, you've got to take out your debt payment first.
Right.
And that comes straight off the top.
Yeah. No, but the businesses are gonna do well.
Any other questions, anything else you want to talk about with this?
No, just gotta keep on working. See what we can do.
Didn't even that much. Yeah, not definitely. The secretaries are partially. Like that.
Yeah, those, they are, well, they are linchpins down there.
Yes.
Those
So
incredible.
I got a cutting cost. That hole does not stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
know.
cut down my tree's dead. It's not moving.
Jim, are you able to send us these documents?
Oh, yeah, I'll get them out to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else anything else that we're doing with this meeting?
Good, we all need bourbon.
So if you got 1 second, I'd like to make a few comments.
Yeah.
This is on the VP
Oh, thank you.
going on at the end of town. Within this room, this was a minor leak.
That's what I heard.
So you have a line, actually two of them, that cross over a storm sewer line. And fortunately, when we got our first call, it's when it rained and it leached directly down into that storm sewer. It was caught very quickly. Literally, the contaminated area is about this big, from the bottom of the pipe down to the storm sewer. The storm sewer is blocked on both sides to isolate it at this point. They've cleaned all the rest of the storm sewers throughout. The leak has stopped. There has never been any benzene level outside of that hole at all. They are chasing down ghosts, just like the fire department are chasing down ghosts because everyone thinks they have infiltration of benzene, whatnot. Nothing else has been found past that hole. We closed down Kitty Academy and the autism place Monday, just as precaution when they were doing major excavating, because we knew that they were gonna aerate a lot of that stuff, but still the benzene levels stayed in the hole. At this point, they are over making a plan to go over to Maynard Junction, which is on Columbia, to hook up a cleaning apparatus to clean that pipe all the way through to the other end. Once they're done with that, that pipe will be deemed environmentally safe inside and out with no residue whatsoever. And at that point, it will go back to that hole, finish mitigating that contaminated soil. And then we'll be done with the project. They have a claim number. They've walked door to door to the residents in the immediate affected area twice. We've been out there 23 times on calls and talked to much more residents than that. We've put it out on social media. It's been given to the newspapers. It's on our website. He has it on our national list. We give updates as we get them. We're out there today for quite a few hours. At that point, if anybody's got any questions for me, that's a general overview of what's going on. I feel very comfortable with what has taken place out there. They are doing their due diligence. They know this is off property. It's not on their property. If it was on their property and I lived next door, I'd have a different thing. But I see what they're doing. I know the process of what they're doing because of me being the chief of the mill for a lot of years. They're doing a very good job at this. Residents need to pause for just a minute. I know they're uptight. Some of them who aren't getting the answers because they're not going through the proper channels. But the first and foremost thing is to get everything at a stop level. That's what they're trying to do. We do have some residents that took BP up on housing. We have a few of them who are in hotels. That was by their choice. The levels in their house were fine, but they did not like the smell. So that's where everything's at. So if anybody has any questions for me,
You're doing a good job, chief.
try it. Yeah.
There,
Hey, did you get in the hotel, Dave?
are they planning to do any kind of a public meeting, or are they
So-
continuing with,
So what I'm trying to accomplish is maybe get a speaker here for the town council meeting to address everybody. What I'm trying to accomplish, we'll see if that happens. Kind of quick. We could definitely make it for the following council meeting, but I'm trying for this next. One.
Yeah. Chief, thank you very much responding to the one resident that contacted me. And I'll add to that, just so you're aware, I will tell her that what you just mentioned in your email earlier, but I'll say, as with anything, we always look at these things once they're all completed and we do our due diligence to review, communication and all that kind of stuff. And her comments will be put into that evaluation. So, but I do appreciate that. And I do think you're right. If we can have some type of a wrap up when this is all completed, that would be a nice way to end it. So, but I do appreciate all the communication up to this point. You've done a nice job with it.
I've noticed that some people will, and I'm not saying that one, but there's another one that denied ever knowing until a 20-minute debate, and they let a few things drop, and I had to call them on it.
Yeah.
Some of these residents, I don't know where the philosophy is or thought process. Sunday, I fielded a call. I was on this call with this individual, him going crazy for 35 minutes, trying to tell me that the hospitals can't test for venting. What was I gonna do about it? And they said, well, our medical protocol is to go to the hospital. He said, but that's a dead end, and you know that, so you should do something different. I said, I'm not sure that that's a dead end. But anyways, after calling our medical advisor, our director, he said, absolutely not, and making contact with community hospital. They are able to take a simple CBC blood test, and a hematologist looks at it and he can see they have that in their bloodstream. They can also do it by a breath test, and long-term is a urine test. And every hospital can check for meds. And this person said that they called them, they said they. This is the kind of thing that's been going on over and over again. Trying to please everybody.
Thank you.
If we